All right. So, again, thank you so much for joining me, and many apologies for canceling on you last time. So we are here today. First, is your name pronounced? Can you pronounce your first name for me?
Leyelle,
Leah,
Leyelle. So it's
Le
like Leyelle. Yeah.
Leah. Okay. So, all right. So, I'm gonna actually have your biography from the that you sent me a few weeks ago. And Leah is an African American and Dominican author and artist from Maryland, USA, raised in part in her ancestral home of the Dominican Republic. Author of the Turnhill Prize winning short story Rain Dance, the novel Damsel in the Red Dress, and illustrator of their inaugural issue of Quills and Tales magazine. She's passionate about telling a story in any form or medium needed to express the beauty and complexity of life and human emotions. More of her work can be found on her Instagram, and I'll put that in the notes of this video. And so, Leo, can you read the name of the poem? You're gonna just say your name and then the title of the poem, and then go ahead and read the poem you have prepared.
Oh, of course. So my name is Leyelle M.G, and this is my poem, Coloring on the Lines. Following the ceramic lip with a finger, an endless loop and death spiral, the world explodes with color and it falls into gray. Eking dye, tinted puddles with green shadows, and light, everything is too close and a million miles away. Don't sit, shouldering your way back into the gloom, slow dancing at the edge of everything you ever wanted, and planning to fall back into the uncomfortable always. Silence is strong affirmation, and destiny decides we're more than content to keep coloring inside the lines. If we push the boundaries just a little bit further and bleed out, imperfection, the ugly is devastatingly beautiful.
All right, and thank you so much. And actually, I always ask poets the same question. I don't know if it's fair or not, but it's a question I always ask poets. So, why do you write poetry?
I write poetry to help me express emotions, especially when there are situations that I feel like I can't fix, or at least can't fix at the moment. It's really helps me to sort through how I feel about them and to process them and calm down. Um, and sometimes I just write poems based off of things that interest or inspire me. I write a lot of poems about birds, because I particularly love tropical birds, like garças, which believe we call white egrets or egrets in English, and also cuervas, which are crows. In this case, these poems were inspired both by fairy tales and the idea of fate and destiny, and also were originally going to be part of a long form story project that was actually a work of fiction, not just poetry, in which poems were really central.
Okay, and what is your process of writing poetry? So, do you write in pencil first on a pad? Do you write straight to your tablet, phone, or computer? So, what's your process of writing poetry?
So usually it starts with me just saying the lines that I think of, like what comes to mind. I don't usually write in pencil for any poetry that I'm writing, but I'll like say like a line that I like, and then from there try to figure out what comes next. And when I've come up with like a few lines in my head that I like, then I start writing it out. I usually don't just sit down to write a poem without already thinking of what I'm going to say next before I write it out. So yeah, I'll start the beginning just in my head or saying it out loud so I know what it sounds like, and then try to figure out how to write it in a way that it'll be read the way it sounds when I say it out loud. Because I used to be very into spoken word poetry, watching a lot of spoken word poets, reading and writing my own spoken words. So I think the way that poetry sounds is a very important part of my writing process.
Okay, cool. And then for the poems that were published in SAMJOKO, what are those poems about?
So those poems are about the character who is the main character of a work of fiction that I have in progress. It's probably going to take a very long time to be completed because it's actually a comic, and the whole process of illustrating that is not fast. But it's about a man with autism trying to get to experience life for the first time after being sheltered by his parents for so long and not really being allowed any freedoms. And this character, the main character, really loves fairy tales, and the female lead of the story also loves fairy tales and works in theater for children, putting on children's theater performances of fairy tales. So there's a constant echoing idea of when you have someone you're destined to meet and all of those ideas that come up in fairy tales very regularly.
All right, and just a quick follow-up question. Since you also write fiction, for you, what do you feel like? Why do you decide to write some things in fiction, some things in poetry? Like, what's the difference for you in choosing one medium over the other?
I think for poetry, I usually use that to express my own feelings when they're very strong. While I use fiction to express situations. And sometimes those situations are also inspired by my real life, but it's when I really need people to understand the idea behind something rather than just the emotion behind something. I'll make it a work of fiction rather than a poem, which is really more about expressing the emotion than about expressing what's happened in detail. Because I found that people tend to take more to hearing about a situation if they think the situation is entirely fictional and if it has all the kind of embellishments that you add to fiction than if you were to just write a biography or a nonfiction essay.
Okay. And then, what tip would you give on how to write poetry?
Ooh. I think the biggest tip for writing poetry is that you need to have a clear idea of what you want to make your readers feel or see when you're writing it. You can write a poem about a thing, anything, say you choose a bird or you choose a fairy tale, but if you don't have a defined point that you're trying to get across with the poem, then it would just go all over the place and you never know where it ends. You never know where to direct yourself. So know what is the point that I'm trying to make with this? What is the feeling I'm trying to get across? The point doesn't have to be, oh, this is a lesson to be learned. This is the moral of the story. It could just be, I want this poem to make my readers feel the way I felt when I wrote it. So how do I write my emotions into the poem so that they will feel it?
And then after this, many people, when they read poems, they feel that they don't understand what they're reading. They may read a few lines and they kind of give up because they don't quite understand what's going on in the poem. So, what tip would you give on how to read poetry? Read means to understand a poem. What tip would you give on how to read poetry?
I think one of the biggest things about understanding poetry is both realizing that not everything is meant to be taken at face value, while also some things really are quite as literal as they sound. So it's about the discernment of when is the poet being more abstract? Did they mean this literally? Or when are they wanting you to take this word for word? For instance, there's a poem where the author talks about having wet fur, and he's referring to himself and his life as a soldier. But obviously, most human beings do not have fur. So why is he saying wet fur? And you realize there that it's an analogy for when young mammals are born, like deer and puppies and things, they're born with their fur wet. So it's an analogy for being very young and inexperienced and not knowing what's going on. While there is another poem called The Black Birthing Room by, I hope I'm saying her name correctly, Eureka Dawson Amoa, who describes, why do I have to put on makeup and get dressed up to go to the hospital so people will think I'm a respectable citizen and I can say that I don't feel well? All of those statements are meant to be taken at face value. Yes, this woman literally is saying she has to get dressed up to go to the hospital to express that she doesn't feel well. So it's about, when are we being dramatic? Because poets love to be dramatic. And when do we want you to realize that this is our reality?
Cool. And then actually, you just mentioned a few poems and poets, but actually, this question anyway. Can you name a poem and poet that you felt was exemplary and why?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, The Black Birthing Room is one of my favorite poems that I have read in a very long time. A lot of my poetry is revolving around lived experiences as a woman of color in this world, and The Black Birthing Room is such a emotional exploration and examination of how hard it is in the most basic parts of living life to be treated like someone who deserves to be cared for. And the emotions that she puts into that poem are so powerfully done and well executed. I highly recommend it to anyone who loves poetry, especially people who are looking for more Black poets to read. It's a very beautiful poem.
Can you say the name of the poet one more time?
So I believe her name is pronounced Yurequa Dawson Amoa.
Okay, cool. All right, and that's about it. And so before we go, do you want to give a shout out? So shout out to anything you're working on, any organization, really anything. So do you want to give a shout out?
Well, I'll give a shout out to I am currently working on the next book of my novel series for Damsel in the Red Dress. It's a romance novel that revolves around two Hispanic Americans. It's a friends to lovers romance that expresses life of people in Maryland, USA. It has a lot of parts of just growing up Hispanic interwoven into the story. So I think both people who come from Latino backgrounds and people who just love romance novels in general really enjoy that story. And it is not over. There are two books available to read online now, and there are more books coming soon. So I would definitely encourage people to check that out.
All right, good. Congratulations on your publications. And actually, that's about it. So again, sorry for canceling last time, and thank you for
Oh,
joining
it's
me
okay.
this time. And that's it. So I'm gonna stop recording now. Let's see
Alrighty.
if the same button. Yep.